Hey y'all, it's Miss A again. Today we're going to be looking at some word problems, and we're going to be using our problem solving strategy, which is known as the UPS check. And we're going to be basically either multiplying or dividing these rational numbers, fractions and or decimals. So let's go ahead and get started and let's see what we are doing on problem number 1. Please make sure you're following along, guys. Of course, take notes. I would suggest that even my virtual kids, my at-home kids, write these questions down. They're not that long. They're pretty short, just a couple sentences. Write them down so you have them to refer to, and you can always go back and study them if you need to. All right. Feel free to pause the video if you need time to write them down. All right. So number 1 says Grace rides the bus to her grandmother's house each day. Each day she travels 8.12 miles. How many miles does she travel after 5 days? Okay, so first of all, I'm going to look at this question and try to find out my important information. So we know that Grace rides the bus each day. Each day basically means every day. Okay, each day she travels 8.12 miles. The question says, how many miles does she travel after 5 days? So we want to know how far she'll travel after 5 days. So what we're going to do is we're going to do our problem solving strategy, which is known as the UPS check. So we start by drawing a big plus sign, and we're going to put U, P, S, and then check. U stands for what do we understand? P stands for plan. What are we going to do to solve it? S stands for solve. We're actually going to do the work here. And then check means we're going to check our answer for reasonableness. We could double check our work if we wanted to, whatever we choose. All right, so let's talk about what we understand in this problem. First of all, we know that Grace rides a bus. Okay, so we understand that she rides a bus. We know that in each day, or one day, because each means one. My light turned off. And it's not coming back on. Oh, sorry, guys. So we know that in one day, she travels 8.12 miles. I'm going to find that right here. Each day, 8.12 miles. The question is, how many miles does she travel after 5 days? So if she were to after 5 days, we want to know how many miles is that. So this is what we're solving for. First of all, I want y'all to kind of realize that our days are going up. We're going from 1 day of 8.12 miles, and we're going up to 5 days. So it should make sense that if this number is increasing, then my miles are going to have to increase. It doesn't make sense that my miles would get lower. So if you look at your answer choices, you've got 40.6. Remember, our whole number is before the decimal. So 40 is bigger than 8. That makes sense. 4 is not. So I can eliminate that. 41, yes. And 4, no. So we can eliminate those two right off the bat. All right, now let's come up with a plan. So one thing you might need that might be helpful is kind of think of this visually. So if we have 5 days, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We know that in those 5 days, she travels 8.12 miles each day. So one thing we could do to solve this problem is we could just take all these and add them up, because we just want to know how much she has after 5. But the quicker thing to do would just be to take the miles per day and multiply it by 5. Whenever you see each is a key word that most of the time does mean multiply. Every now and then it's going to mean divide, but in this case, and probably majority of the time, each does mean to multiply. So that's what we're going to do to solve this problem. Again, we could have just added it 5 times as well. All right, let's go ahead and just solve it over here in this section. So we're going to take our 8.12 and we're going to multiply it by 5. Remember, don't line up your decimals when you're multiplying. Just line up your numbers and then move your decimal in the end. 5 times 2 is 10. 5 times 1 is 5, plus the 1 that we carried is 6. And then 5 times 8 is 40. And then there were 2 numbers after the decimal, so I've got to move my decimal 2 places, starting at the right, going towards the left. So our answer is 40.60. And we want to see, does that make sense? 40, we're solving for miles. Is that reasonable? Does it make sense that it could be that amount? So one thing we could do is just kind of double check our work over here. We could resolve it and make sure we get the same exact answer. But another thing we could do is just round it. Let's estimate. Let's say she didn't travel 8.12 miles. Let's say she only traveled 8 miles a day. If we multiply that by 5, we would get 40. But she really didn't travel 8. She traveled a little bit more than 8. So our answer should be a little bit more than 40, which is exactly what we have. So it does make sense. It is reasonable. So that is our correct answer. A. All right, let's go on to question number 2. Question number 2 says peaches are $2.79 per pound at the grocery store. If Sally bought 3.5 pounds of peaches, how much did she spend? All right, so we know that peaches cost $2.79 per pound at the grocery store. That means for 1 pound, I'm gonna put LB, that's the abbreviation for pound. So 1 per pound, that's what per means, 1, is $2.79. If Sally bought 3.5 pounds of peaches, how much did she spend? Okay, so again, we're going to do our UPS check. UPS check. And we're going to start off with what do we understand? Okay, so we know that peaches cost for 1 pound, 1 LB equals the $2.79. So 1 pound equals $2.79. And then we know that we are wanting to figure out how much she spends on 3.5 pounds. So that's what we're solving for. So again, we can see here that our pounds are going up to 3.5. So our price is going to have to go up to a number higher than $2.79. So see if we can eliminate anything. No, that's higher. Higher, higher. Okay, $1.98 is lower than $2.79, so I can eliminate that one. All right, now let's come up with a plan. Let's determine what are we going to do to solve this problem. All right, so we know that, is there any keywords that tell us what we're going to do? Per. Per is kind of like that keyword that we saw earlier of each. So this is another keyword for multiplication. So we're going to multiply the price times however many pounds that we're buying. So we know the price is $2.79. We're going to multiply it by the pounds that we're buying, which is 3.5. So one problem that we come to here is the fact that this is a decimal and that this is a mixed number or a fraction. So we can't multiply numbers that are in different forms. But if you look over here, your answers are in decimals. So that means that we need to convert this number into a decimal, and then we can multiply those 2 new numbers together. All right, and it makes sense because we're solving for a dollar amount. Dollars aren't measured in fractions. We don't say that we spent 3 7/8 of a dollar. It's always in decimal form. All right, and we know how to do this. We've done this the last 2 chapters, converting fractions into decimals. So remember that your whole number out front, that is your whole number goes before the decimal. So we're going to have 3 point, and then 1/2, you have 2 options. You can either Tybo it, divide, numerator goes in, denominator goes out, top in, bottom out, and you could divide 0.0, and then 2 goes into 10 5 times. You could do that. Oh, sorry, can't see what I'm doing. Sorry. All right, you could do that, or you could think of this, guys. This is what's known as a benchmark fraction. This is a fraction that's very common that you need to know and memorize. Half is half of a dollar, which is 0.50 or 0.5, okay? Remember that you could put a 0 here. If you thought of this as money and half of a dollar is 50 cents, that makes sense. That you can take off the 0 and just make it 3.5. Adding a 0 doesn't change the value at all. So even though we got 0.5 and put our whole number in front, we can add a 0 if we thought of this as money. This isn't money, this is peaches or pounds, but it's the same thing. So now our next step of our plan is to multiply these two numbers together. So 2.79, we're going to multiply by 3.50. So let's solve that. Remember, don't line up your decimals whenever you're multiplying. And actually, when I multiply, I'm going to leave off this 0 because it's literally just making the problem longer. I don't need it. I'm just going to multiply by 3.5. So 2.79 times 3.5. Please don't line up your decimals. Now we're going to multiply. 9 times 5 is 45. 35 plus 4 gets 39. 5 times 2 is 10, plus 3 makes 13. I'm going to cross those off. Don't forget your placeholder. We get 27. 21 plus 2 makes 23. 6 plus 2 makes 8. Add them up. And we get that. But now we have to move our decimal in our final answer by counting the decimal places. So in this number, we have 2 numbers after the decimal, and here we have 1. So 2 plus 1 makes 3. So we're going to start at the back and move it 1, 2, 3 times. So our answer is 9.765, but I want you to notice that this number doesn't match any of these exactly because we're talking about money. When we talk about money, we can only stop at 2 decimal places. So we're going to look at this number, and if it's a 5 or more, we're going to raise the score. If it's a 4 or less, we're going to let it rest. So because this is a 5, we're going to make this one higher, making it 9.77, which is our total amount for 3.5 pounds of peaches. So let's see if that is reasonable. Let's estimate it. So one thing that we could do is, let's say she only bought 3 pounds of peaches and they cost $3. So we rounded this down to 3 pounds, rounded that up to $3. So 3 times 3 is 9. Is my answer close to 9? Yeah, it is. So it should make pretty good sense. We also could have, if you wanted to say, keep this as 3.5 and then make this into 3 pounds. I'm sorry, $3. 15, 9, and 10, move it 1 time. So it should be a little bit less than that because they weren't exactly $3 per pound. So it's $9.77, a little bit less than $10.50? Yes. Just making sure it's somewhat reasonable. These numbers were way too low compared to our estimation, between $9 and $10.50. Alright guys, I know this video is kind of long, but we're going to do one more example together. And y'all are going to do some practice problems on y'all's own. Alright, we have that Juan works at a restaurant and works 6.5 hours in a day. If he makes $9.50 per hour, how much does he make in a day? Alright, so let's do our UPS check. UPS check. Juan works at a restaurant and works 6.5 hours in a day. So each day he works 6.5 hours. If he makes $9.50 per hour for each hour, how much does he make in a day? So we want to know how much he makes in the day. So in the day, we know he works 6.5 hours. So let's talk about what we understand. What do we understand? So we know that in one day, he works, so each day he works 6.5 hours. And we want to know if he works for, I'm sorry, I got confused. So we know that in 1 hour, so one day he works 6.5 hours, and then for 1 hour, he makes $9.50. Sorry, I got distracted. So in one day he works 6.5 hours. 1 hour he makes $9.50. So we want to know that in 6.5 hours, how much money is he going to make? All right, let's come up with a plan. So again, we know that this keyword of per means multiply. So we're going to multiply how much he makes in 1 hour by how many hours he's actually working. So we're going to take $9.50 and we're going to multiply it by 6.5. Okay, so again, we come to that same problem we had earlier. We have a decimal and a fraction, so we have to make them both the decimal. This is the same exact fraction. I told you this is a very common one you're going to see a lot. So earlier we already tie-boded if we needed to, but we can also think of this as 6.5. So 0.5 is 1/2. So what we have to do is multiply 950 times 6.5. All right, so let's go ahead, or first of all, let's see if we can make some answer choices go away. So 1 hour is going up to 6.5. This price has to go up. All right, so, oh, nope, they all go up from 950. But this one seems a lot lower than the rest of them. If 1 hour he makes almost $10, does it make sense that we're going to work 6 hours and only make $6 more? No, that's way too low. All right, so let's go ahead and solve it. So 9, again, I'm going to leave off this 0 because I don't really need it. 9.5 times 6.5. I'm going to multiply. 5 times 5 is 25. 45 plus 2 makes 47. Cross that off, cross that off. 30, 54, 57. 11 and 6. And now we have to move the decimal 2 times from the back, once, twice, and we get $61.75, which does match our answer choice here, so we should be good. But let's check it. Let's check for reasonableness. Let's say that he made $10 an hour, not 9.5. Let's say he ran up to 10, and let's say he works 6 hours instead of 6.5. All right, so if we multiply that, 10 times 6 is 60. All right, so 60 hours, but he really didn't work 6.5. He worked a little bit more than that, so it should be a little bit more than 60, which is 61.75, so it is reasonable. So our correct answer is D. All right, guys, like I said, I'm sorry this video was so long. It just had a lot of word problems, and we had to do this or introduce this new strategy of UPS check. Make sure you're following it, guys. It just helps you think through the process and know exactly what you're dealing with and what you're trying to get to. So if y'all have any questions or concerns, please feel free to contact me on Zoom or send me an email in Canvas. Y'all have a great day, and I will see y'all later. Bye, guys.